So how to apply? So this is a free scheme. It's entirely free. I know people that have successfully claimed, including members of my family and myself as well. I claimed as a close family member. I put my claim in 2020. I received my finances in 2021. I claimed on the basis that my parent, who come to the UK before the 1st of January 1973, was invited here by the Queen in order to be in the Queen's army to serve for Queen and country. He come here, he did just that. He served in Queen and country. Whilst he was training and preparing for the army, he worked in factories. He experienced racism. He experienced PTSD due to the army that affected him, that affected the way that he parented us, and it affected my quality of childhood. I also had experienced maternal deprivation, so spending some parts of my childhood without my parents. In the care system, that obviously had an impact on me psychologically. I explained that a bit further in the form and provided some evidence, such as evidencing that I had depression and anxiety in childhood due to childhood trauma. I got that evidence from my GP. I got evidence that I was in care from my previous social workers from when I was a child. And I used those two pieces of evidence to evidence what I had been through. Of course, I elaborated and explained it in further detail of how it affected me, but those two pieces of evidence alone supported my information that I've inputted on the application. So you can explain what has happened to you, how it's affected you, but then please always, always, always remember the evidence. If you do not provide evidence, then you are unlikely to be awarded. And if you only put what has happened and do not put how it affected you, then you may not be awarded because you've only said, I've been through this, I've been through this, I've been through this. You have to relate it back to the Windrush era, the Windrush scandal, and how you have been directly impacted, even if it's intergenerational, even if it's secondary trauma. Okay, that's very, very important. So make sure that you put, first of all, your personal details. You will put whether you are the person who arrived before the 1st of January 1973 or the child, grandchild, or other close family member. You will then put how they are eligible. So I'd write, yeah, my dad come in this year. He come under these circumstances, and he is or is not a British citizen. He's not a British citizen. And I put that he's still not to this day because he hasn't been given a British passport, which is shameful on the British government and the Home Office because he served for this country 3 times in the British Army. Anyway, you will put how you're related to that person, and then you will evidence that. So obviously my birth certificate or proof that he's your next of kin or they're your next of kin or whatever, you're their next of kin. And then after you prove that you're related to them and they are eligible for the scheme, you then put how it's impacted your life. Or if you've put how you are eligible for the scheme, you then put what immigration and deportation issues you've experienced, and then you write about your impact of life. If you are applying for a discretionary application, you would do all of the above. So write how the person's related to you. You would provide their death certificate. You would provide evidence that you're allowed to make that application on their behalf. So either proof that you're executor or representative of the estate, or that you've got permission from the next of kin or eldest child. You would then prove that they were eligible for the scheme. You would then have to prove how their life was affected in the representative of an estate application. Then, if there's any discretionary categories under the primary, close family member, or representative of an estate application, you will add that. What you then need to do, very, 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 very importantly, is make sure that you scan or copy the application, because once you send this off, there is no way that any person can really write out that application twice, because it's very draining spiritually and emotionally and mentally. It's very draining to write about trauma. So make sure that you copy it either by taking pictures on your phone, scanning it, or whatever. Once you have done that, you then post it off to the address on the bottom of every single application. You can post it by hand. It's a free post. I will read out that information on the next slide or next couple of slides, the postage information, or you can scan it and email it to the Home Office, to the Windrush Compensation Scheme team. You can, of course, put it for signed for post. That's what I done with mine, because I just like to track it to make sure it's got there, so no one can say that it didn't arrive, or so it can't get damaged on the way or whatever. Once you send it off to the Home Office, give it about 10 days, 2 weeks, and then call them and say, hi, have you received my application? They will look out for it, and they will look out for they will let you know if it's been received. They'll be able to tell you whether it's been received yet or scanned onto the system, or both. So then once they've done that, you should then receive a letter in about 3 to 6 weeks, I would say, or maybe 2 to 6 weeks, a letter from the Home Office to say to you that they have they've received your application, and they will be processing it. When they send you this letter, they'll give you a reference number. It's very, very, very important that with this reference number, that you keep the reference number, because moving forward, the only way they are going to give you any information about your application is if you give that reference number. If you don't give that reference number, you may as well say goodbye to your application. It's very important that you keep any letters, any communication from the Home Office about your application, that you keep it, please. It's very important, because you never know if they're going to say yes or no, and if you're going to be happy with the decision or not. You never know if you kind of have to challenge their decision. There is an appeal process that we'll explain a little bit further on. So it's very important that you keep any type of communication from them. So how to apply? You can apply by downloading the free application form from the government website, www.gov.uk/apply-windrush-compensation-scheme. There is a close family member form. There's the link there. But if you just go to that apply Windrush Compensation Scheme or the Windrush Compensation Scheme, you will find all of these links there.
And sorry to interject, Sister Katie. Also, feel free to screenshot certain aspects of it, that if you want to keep a record. Thank you. Carry on.
Yes, screenshot. Yes, that's important as well. There's a close family member form, the primary claimant form. Remember that the primary claimant form is only for the people who are alive and who arrived in the UK before the 1st of January 1973 from a British Commonwealth nation. The close family member form is for close family members or partners as well, significant partners, not just someone that you dated once, but if you've got children to them, if you lived with them for over 20 years or whatever, over 2 years, or other significant categories, yes. If you don't fit into any of these categories, but you still think that you may be eligible, remember there's the discretionary box, the discretionary option to state your information and provide your evidence on all of the 3 different applications. There's the deceased application form, the representative of an estate. Please remember to read the guidance. Anybody can give you information, but it's actually your duty to check whether that information is correct or not. So as I say, I've given you all of the information to check anything what I've advised you here. Please do feel free, go and check that information. Make sure that you understand the information in order for you to be able to best complete the application forms. For further assistance, you can call the Windrush helpline, which is the Home Office. It's not my number or Cheryl's number, or the spiritual injection number. This is the number for the Home Office. It's 0800 678 1925. That's 0800 678 1925. Now, this is the Home Office. I must advise you that the people who answer these forms are not legally qualified or in any position to tell you whether you're eligible for a claim or not. All they are legally able and supposed to do, and all they are trying to do, is to if you request a copy of the application, because you can request one to be posted to you, you can request one from this line. You may ask them questions, but honestly, if they tell you that you are not eligible, that is wrong. They're not supposed to be doing that. And you tell them that you want an application form, whether they tell you that they think you're not eligible or not. You be firm with them, and you advise them that you're entitled to an application, you would like an application, and it's their duty to send you one. That's it. Now, the line is open Monday to Fridays, 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. and it is a free call. However, I have heard from a number of members of the community that they have been given incorrect advice and telling people that they're not eligible when they are. So just be a little bit careful. If they do advise you that you're not eligible, just still apply and let the people who are legally trained and employed to tell you whether your application is eligible or not. Allow them to do it, please. You can email the Windrush helpline. That's at commonwealthtaskforce@homeoffice.gov.uk. I'm not sure how long it takes for them to respond to you by email. It's been a while since I've emailed them myself. So now we're on to the process, and we're into the latter part of the presentation. The process. So it's to collect and collate your evidence of what you may think fits into any of the categories that I've explained. Download the correct form. Make sure you read this form. Think back and think of any other evidence you may need or you may have access to. Again, if you are applying to agencies to request your information, there is something called a Freedom of Information Act request, which means that any official organisation or body has to respond to your Freedom of Information Act request by law. If you send off your request and state that you request information on you in relation to health, for example, if you're applying to the NHS, PALS, GP or whatever, say I request my information on my health records in relation to A, B and C, under the Freedom of Information Act request, then they have to provide it to you within, I think it can be 28 days, 30 days. They have to provide that to you by law. There's also another way that you can request information legally, and it's under a DSAR. So that's D for Delta, S for Sierra, A for Alpha, and R for Romeo. That's DSAR, DSAR. That stands for Data Subject Access Request. Now, you can do that. This is what I done to request my evidence that I was in care as a child. I sent a DSAR request to my previous social services, Googled their name, and you can do this. It depends on which borough placed you in care at the time. So before you were placed in care, where did you live? So did you live in Lambeth, Croydon, wherever? Google Lambeth Children's Services. There's an address on there. There's telephone numbers on there. You can contact the duty team. You can speak to them. You can say to them, can you give me an email address or an address where I can send a DSAR application, a subject access request application? And then in the letter or email, you'd write, Dear Lambeth Social Services, for example, I request evidence that I was in care as a child. My name is, write your full name as a child that you were placed in care as. Not now, because if you've been married or you change your name or whatever, they may not find you. Use your full name, your full original name on your birth certificate, your date of birth, and the kind of years, if you can remember, that you were in foster care, and they should be able to get back to you within 28 days or 30 days. They will get back to you straight away and acknowledge that your access request or Freedom of Information Act request. If you don't, send it again. When I was sending out emails and stuff, if they didn't respond to me, I'd send it 5 times and then I'd call them up and say, hi, have you received my emails? It's kind of a form of kind of professional harassment. Be polite when you're speaking to them, because remember, you need something from them. But, you know, call them as many times as you need to and email them and ask them whether they've received your information. You have to put it in writing, so it does have to be by email or by writing. And then if it is by pen or paper or whatever, always keep a copy, keep all this evidence that you've been to them and you've requested this information from them. Request that you request it under a DSAR, a Data Subject Access Request, and that you want this evidence. That the Freedom of Information Act request and DSAR requests work with healthcare, employment, education, police, criminal justice system. You can get police records, whether you've been arrested or whether you've filed complaints about other people for being harassed, racially treated, abused, whatever. Get all of those records, please. The more you put on the form, the higher your award is going to be. You have to put everything on there, despite of how kind of gruesome it might be or how much it may bring up trauma and put you off. You have to put it on there, please, because a lot of people have suffered in many bad ways, and you have to relate it back to the Windrush scandal. So, for example, if, for example, you were abused in some form of way, either in early childhood or by a partner, how do you relate that back to the Windrush scandal? Well, you relate it back to the fact that some people were left in their home nations as a child and they were not left with immediate family members who cared for them. And maybe it happened then. Sorry if this is bringing negative emotions up for people. If you weren't brought up with both of your parents and you didn't see positive um, relationships between the man and the male and the female in your household or in your upbringing, that can affect the way that you experience love now, and also how you give love in relationships or receive love in relationships. If you experience attachment disorder due to having a broken bond with your parents in early childhood, then that can affect your relationships now and can be a reason as to why you've had failed relationships or not with the other parent of your children, and how that's affected you in your life, or had failed marriages or whatever, and how it's affected you emotionally and mentally. You can relate that back to broken relationships in early childhood. So there's psychological disorders that I want you all to look into. Maternal deprivation, that's based on you being deprived of the maternal love and maternal stimulation from your mother in early childhood and throughout childhood. Many of our people have been through that due to being left alone in our home nations. And that doesn't mean our grandmothers or mothers were bad people, or aunties were bad people, but it's the fact that they were kind of conned by the British government that if you come over here, you're going to have a better life, you'll be able to bring your family members over. And actually, when they attempted to bring family members over, the UK government denied them being brought over. Like our grandmas tried to send for our uncles, aunties, parents a number of times, and it was denied, and they had to pay thousands and thousands of pounds each time as well. So again, all of those things need to be evidenced. Make sure you download the correct form. Make sure you carefully go through each section of the form. Make sure you read each question and understand each question properly before you attempt to answer it. It's very helpful if when you write in your application that you write it in a way of a timeline, so it's easier for the reader to follow. So if you write, for example, in 1971, I was invited to say for example, in 1962, I was left in Jamaica by my parents and promised that they would send for me when they'd saved enough money. I then, was neglected in this way, or didn't experience love in this way, or whatever in this way. And then I did finally got accepted to come to the UK in this year. When I arrived, it was very cold. It was a hostile environment. I experienced racism. I experienced negative experiences in education, in school, in society. They were saying that, Black people not beautiful. It had a negative impact on your self-view. Your parents were traumatized due to what they experienced. That affected the way that they parented you. You had to, at 17-year-old, re-meet your parents again and reintroduce yourself to your parents again. That affected people in many ways. You've got siblings that live around the corner from you and you don't know them, you don't know their children, they don't know your children, because of these broken relationships that stem back to attachment disorder, which is a psychological disorder. Look into those things: attachment disorder, maternal deprivation, loneliness and isolation, and how that can turn into a mental health disorder. And of course, they can go on to other things, such as isolation is associated with schizophrenia. People who were heavily traumatized and could not, recover from what they've been through in the broken relationships, and feeling let down and abandoned and rejected from their family members. They weren't able, and are not able to escape that throughout their lives. So make sure that you evidence these things with any mental health, with any GP records, any support services that you've used, any medications that you've used to help you sleep for depression and anxiety or whatever. Please make sure that you do evidence as much as you can. Reread the form once you've completed the form and completed each section, and made sure that you've provided as much information as possible. Make sure you've provided as much evidence to match your information as possible. Don't just write, again, I must stress the importance of not just writing what happened. So not just a timeline of what happened, a timeline of what happened needs to be done, but then how this affected you is very important, and the evidence. Once you've done all that and you're happy and confident that you've put everything down that you can, and you've provided as much evidence as possible, or any evidence that you've tried to collect, tried to retrieve these documents and the people or organization didn't provide evidence, put all of that in there. So if you sent information, emails or letters to request documents from certain agencies and you haven't been able to, put those copies of those emails or letters in with your application so that the Home Office can see that you've tried to retrieve this evidence. And please do take your time. This is not an application form that you can fill in one session. It's not one of those where you can look at, right, let's sit there and fill in thousands of applications for as many people as possible. It's not that, because everyone's case is individual and collecting the evidence does take time. Read through your application one last time to make any final edits, and make sure that everything's there, and then send it off, please. Send the form to, you can scan and email it to the Windrush Compensation Scheme at homeoffice.gov.uk, or the Commonwealth Task Force if you live abroad or live in the UK. But the Commonwealth Task Force at homeoffice.gov.uk is for people who, for example, if you come here before the 1st of January 1973, but you've gone back to your home nation, and you've gone back to your home nation, then you still can apply, because you come here before the 1st of January and you suffered losses or had to prove your right to stay, and that may be why you went back there. Then you can apply. If you're the children who got left in the Caribbean or in the Commonwealth nations and you did not come here, but your siblings did, you can still apply under the close family member, because you were the child of someone who come before the 1st of January 1973. The postage address is Free Post Windrush Compensation Scheme, and that's in Sheffield. It's S3 8WA, and that's in the United Kingdom. If you're applying from overseas, it would be the Windrush Compensation Scheme, PO Box 3468, Sheffield, and that's the same postcode, S3 8WA, United Kingdom. The process, what happens next, you will be contacted to confirm that your claim has been received. You will then be contacted by the Home Office if they request any further evidence. When they contact you, please do respond in a timely fashion. You don't want to delay your application. You don't want to delay the payments coming to you or your decision by any means. So make sure that you respond as soon as possible. If you don't understand the letter that the Home Office have sent you, send the spiritual injection an email, and let them know what the Home Office have said on the letter, and then we can provide you with some advice and guidance. If you are successful, you will get a letter offering you compensation, a compensation award. If you accept the offer, you must write back to accept the offer, and make sure that you complete all of the boxes on the offer letter and sign it. Send this off in a timely manner. Again, take a photo of the signed letter and send it unsigned for if you want to. I did. I think it's worth it. Do that so you can track it and to prevent any delays of the Home Office receiving your letter. Then Your award of compensation should take about 3 to 6 weeks to be deposited in your account once you've signed the letter and they've received it. So once you've signed the letter and you've sent it off to the Home Office, call them back in about 10 days and say, hi, have you received my letter? Because sometimes they will say things like, oh, we've received it. Let me check if it's uploaded on the system. Or it's not uploaded on the system yet. Let me just upload it for you, so you can kind of help progress your application by calling them frequently to check on the progress. If you live overseas, the money will be paid into your bank account using the international bank transfer. Now, depending on how much evidence and information you provide, if you provide a lot of information and a lot of evidence, you can then that you may get a response and answer sooner rather than later. If you kind of prolong it and you kind of just write whatever you think is necessary and you haven't really followed my advice and guidance or the guidance on the Home Office website, then it will take a longer time, or you may be denied. If you are not successful the first time, you may need to request a review, and then whatever they say to you, please do let us know. We'll be able to provide guidance and advice on what to do next and how to manage it to make sure that you are given the award that you deserve.